Hello, my name is Neil Chambers. I am the founder of Chambers Design. We are a design build studio in located in South Orange, New Jersey. And I've just been thinking about doing a this webinar for a while because it's going to become a bigger and bigger deal in New Jersey and around stormwater. Um, to think about to let people start to know what's coming down the pike for what is called MS4 permits. And this webinar, I'm not going to get too much into the technical piece. I just want this to be an overview so that if you watched it, you could have a really good idea about what MS4, how MS4 permits will affect your projects in the near future. So the basic concepts of an MS4. So if we look at this first slide here, an MS4 is the MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Program. And what that is that there are places in throughout the United States where stormwater systems are it's kind of like so there's things called storm sewer combined systems where you have sewer systems and stormwater systems combined, and that's more in like older towns and cities like New York City and other places. And then you have a lot of areas where you have a stormwater system. When it rains, all the water runs and it's separate from your sewer systems, and that is what this permit is for. And basically, what it means is that you different towns have to get a permit to use the storm system, quote unquote, storm system of an area. Um, and to be able to do that, it has to show that the water quality and the flow rates and a whole bunch of other things are meeting the standards that are regulated. And so, what this map is showing here is the areas, and not to get too much into the backstory, but there was a phase one that you see in green, these green areas that happened a bunch of years ago. And now phase two, you see in blue, are all the areas they're going to have to comply with this MS4 um, permitting process. And as you can see, if you look over here in New Jersey, basically the entire state is going to have to comply, which is a big deal. So that means that every municipality in the state will have to start to treat their water, their stormwater differently to be able to achieve a permit to legally use stormwater systems. And a stormwater system is typically going to be the the inflows that you see on the side of the street. Those inflows will typically lead to pipes, and those pipes are then led to streams and creeks and rivers and whatnot. And the whole system, I mean, it's kind of funny because one of the things that I first found out when I started doing this work in South Orange in New Jersey is that most of the rivers are considered storm basins based on how they were modified over the last, say, 50, 60, 70 years, where a lot of times you'll go to a river and it's really low, and that's because they've been dug out to be able to contain more stormwater than would have naturally been allowed. Most natural streams are not so deep in like a basin, and so your rivers and streams that you see like that are technically stormwater basins, which are regulated through different authorities. That may be the state, it may be federal, and so there are regulations around that. And this MS4 is like this new layer that is going to affect. Now, in the past, yeah, and to say that it's going to affect homeowners, because in the past, a lot of these regulations were really just around large projects, and that would be a new housing development or a large building or a large, like a stadium or something like that. But these regulations and how towns are going to have to address these issues will affect residential residential owners as well. And I'll get into that in just a second. So, um, and one of the ways that MS4 permitting processes are being addressed is with what is called a stormwater utility. The stormwater utility has been kind of controversial. They've called it a rainwater tax and things like that. But essentially, the stormwater utility are being established in different places. And this map shows where some of the utilities have been located. This is a little old. This is from 2016 because in New Jersey, there are 3 to 4 utilities already established. One of them is in my neighboring town called Maplewood, New Jersey. I know that places like Princeton is thinking about doing it. And I met a guy who was in the process of helping develop that for Princeton at an event I was at last week. And there are 2 or 3 others already established in the state. And what a stormwater utility does is that it is a fee that is attached to both residential, commercial, municipal properties. And that fee is calculated in terms of how much the property is using the stormwater system. And then there's a fee. And what the fee does is that where typically a town would have taxes, and those taxes would then go to stormwater utility improvements. So, for example, a parking lot is flooding, or an apartment building is flooding because the stormwater system, the drainage for the stormwater on the street is broken, or it's not sized correctly. The way that it would happen without a utility is that tax money would have to be allotted to fix that. And the problem with that is that there's a lot of red tape. It's very slow because taxes are not able to be allotted directly based on specific needs without the administrative kind of process attached to it. Stormwater utilities, once a stormwater utility is established, all the fees that are coming in for that is then the town can allot that directly to stormwater improvements. So where that parking lot or apartment building was getting flooded based on like a broken or an undersized drainage system on the street, is now that money from the fees of the utility can be directly put there to fix it. And to a lot of degree, and to my understanding, is that's been really successful in terms of getting fees. I think a lot of people have commented around not just some people can call it a rainwater tax and things like that. I think the bigger issue is like, why aren't these things being addressed beforehand? I think that this is a layer of administration that is potentially, kind of shifting the responsibility from the existing municipality to property owners to some degree. But the problems have to get fixed, and I think this is one of the ways. And so because of these MS4 permitting, you're going to likely see a lot more stormwater utilities popping up throughout New Jersey, because it is one way to take more control to address the ability for a municipality to get their permits. So, the towns that already have an active stormwater utility, Maplewood, like I mentioned, New Brunswick, and a couple others. I think there is one other. I could only find 3 when I was looking at it. But in these towns, residents are already getting an annual fee for their stormwater utility use. And so you can see that, like this one says, in Maplewood, it operates a dedicated stormwater utility to address climate hazards and drainage. You can view town initiatives on their website. And the thing about it is that they also will give you, there's typically, at least, let me not say typically, in Maplewood specifically, they have stormwater credits where if you can show that you are doing certain things to reduce your usage of the system, both if you're a commercial space or residential space, you can get a percent of that fee eliminated, which is, I think, it's a good thing because it will, have people who may not be interested in doing things to address their stormwater. It might actually encourage people to do that. And here is an example of a credit this is for residential properties in Maplewood. So for example, like a rain barrel, if you install a rain barrel to your house, you can get a $20 credit, a one-time credit, where if you do a dry well, you can also get some credit for that, minimum around 10%, maximize at 40%. So you can get your fee reduced by a certain percent. And I did go through this. I think most of the most, you can see that, like it says, is the maximum 50% credit is available for customers to apply for credits based on, the stormwater management systems installed, meaning that they're already completed. And so, this is kind of what I'm talking about. So what'll happen as utilities come around, I would assume, I'm not sure, I don't actually know if this is like your standard operation, but if you have a stormwater utility come around, that there will be these types of credits available. And that would, people would want to do rain barrels or dry wells or, porous pavers or rain gardens or bioswales. And that's, a lot of times when stormwater utilities are talked about, so all these different systems like rain barrels and rain gardens or dry wells or, porous pavers and patio pavement, that kind of stuff is considered green infrastructure. That's kind of like the big umbrella term. Often when you hear, stormwater utility is being discussed, green infrastructure is discussed with it. But the one thing I want to make sure people understand is that stormwater utilities are not in the business to just install green infrastructure. They are in the business of collecting fees so they can address stormwater problems that may or may not have any kind of ecological or sustainable feature to it. In fact, a lot of times the stormwater systems are underground and all the money that's being spent isn't seen at all, which can be a problem for people to help people understand what those fees are going towards and how they are improving their systems. But this is a credit. This is what the kind of credits are. This is one page of several pages. It's really interesting to see. So how it will affect residents, which I think is really important, is that and now the municipalities that I've kind of interacted with now, there's two phases that I've found in this stormwater systems happening, where you're seeing regulations, or local ordinances created to help reduce stormwater runoff. What stormwater runoff means is that when it rains, all the water that runs off your roof or your driveway into the stormwater system, it goes to your curb and it flows to one of those inlets. That's the runoff. And so what I've seen, there are the stormwater utilities, which is addressing it one way. And then there are other places which I've seen, such as Montclair. What we've had projects in Montclair and Milburn, and we've seen how neither Montclair nor Milburn have a stormwater utility now. I don't know if they're planning on doing it or want to do it. I don't really know where they stand with that. But they do have requirements for construction projects to meet stormwater storage on site, and they specifically call out as one way to do that with green infrastructure. And so the way towns typically, and this is kind of a standard approach that you'll see, not just with towns, but major and minor development. And so your major development are things where you're looking at large projects. So you can see like a disturbance of one half acre, which is a big, or, the creation of a quarter acre, or, so you can see like these are larger projects. But then minor developments are projects that are around 250 square feet. That is pretty small. That's the size of a deck or a patio or a swimming pool, because from town to town, swimming pools are seen as impervious, and so I'm forgive me for throwing out all these terms, but impervious, all that means is that water cannot soak. If rain hits the surface that's impervious, it can't soak into the ground directly. So that's considered impervious, and the way they calculate your square footage of impervious surfaces is based on the size of for instance, a swimming pool or a deck that is located on your yard. So 250 square feet is fairly small. But if you're doing a project, and this is why I'm doing this video, if there's tons and tons of available information about major developments, but minor developments, it's not as well known. I think if you're in the construction world or engineering or architecture, major minor development is you know what that is, and you've probably been dealing with rainwater and stormwater and disturbances and imperviousness pretty much on a regular basis for large projects, whether it's a hospital or an airport or some kind of commercial project. But residents, I find, do not normally deal with this stuff, and it can be quite a surprise to find out that there's really rigid requirements from towns to show that you have stormwater storage on site, when you're looking to do like a small patio difference. And I will say that in the towns that we've worked in, that 250 square feet or 200 square feet sometimes is based on net, and sometimes is based on new. And what I mean by that is that if you have a project and you are doing a new deck, and your deck is 300 square feet, but in doing it, you're removing 100 square feet of impervious from a different part. Let's say you had a patio that you're getting rid of that was 100 square feet, and you're putting on a deck that's 300 square feet. You're eliminating 100 square feet and you're adding 300, so the net would be 200 square feet, and you would not be considered a minimum or minor development, so these requirements wouldn't be a part of your project. Other places we've worked is found that you're eliminating 100 and you're adding 300. Doesn't matter. You're adding 300, and you are required to address the concerns. And I will say, as a professional working inside different towns in New Jersey, this is all kind of happening. This says 2000. This is stuff that's only kind of coming up the past few years, and has been under the radar a little bit. We're seeing it more and more and more. So it's like, sometimes some of the people who've been working in the field in your area may not even know these exist, and it's kind of a surprise when you submit for your zoning review or your engineering review, and you get back a comment that's like, "Oh, you got to do this stuff," and you're like, "Okay." And so what it requires is, I would say, significant. And I would just the thing that I've seen throughout New Jersey, since say 2020, has been a beefing up of zoning requirements and engineering requirements that is much different, much more stringent than it used to be, especially for residential projects. And I think that was because there was such an explosion 2020, 21, 22, that maybe it was done to help try to manage how all the different construction that just suddenly happened. I'm not sure, but sometimes it seems to be a little bit of an overkill. Um, but regardless, it's required now. So I just want to kind of go over what you will need if you're doing a project that gets you into the minor development bracket. So this is a project that was done. This was in Montclair. I think I've gotten, you can see Montclair, but what we had to do, these are submissions that you're required to have. You know, you have to, what you see this dash line says limited disturbance. So you have to show that. That's required because there's a you know, if you disturb a certain amount of dirt, then you have to go for a different permit, and if you're under it, then you don't. So you have to show that limited disturbance. This project was a pool and a deck, and so we were also eliminating some driveway, and there was some old patio, but either way, we still got over. And I think in Montclair, and I don't know if this has changed, this was based on your net, so we didn't have to show storage for green infrastructure for the entire square footage, but we did have to show it for a portion of it. And the way that we showed the storage was with, in yellow, these yellow areas, was 2 rain gardens. And we had leaders go, or gutters, the gutters were led, the water from the roofs were led to these 2 different areas. And we showed how big they were. We had to have topography to show that we were leading the water to these sites and that they would go to this site, to these different locations. And a couple of things that you have to do, along with the limited disturbance with rain gardens, is that you need to do what's called a percolation test and a soil test. Now, I've seen these to be consistent throughout the places we've worked with. So a percolation test is where you dig a hole, and that hole needs to be a certain size. Normally, it's 12 to 18 inches in diameter. And normally it's between 18 to 24 inches deep. The depth is based on the bottom of your system, not the ground bottom, but the bottom of whatever you're going to have. You would need to dig down 2 feet or 18 inches. And then you'll have to test the ground to see if if the water does infiltrate fast enough based on what the requirements are. So that's the percolation test. And the soil test is going to show if within that area, if you do have, if there are signs of high level, if the groundwater is at a high enough level that it would disrupt the ability for your rain garden or the infiltration to happen at a fast enough rate. And that happen, you can do that. You have to have a soil engineer do that, and it's basically what that does is that if you dig a hole and you fill it up with water and you see that it percolates fast enough, but then there's signs that at some period of the year that the groundwater comes up and it's like 6 inches into your hole. Well, that's what that's telling someone, is that even though it infiltrates when the water is not present, there could be times where 6 inches of your hole would be totally full of water, and the water that you're storing would have nowhere to go. So that's what the 2 things are for. And this is what that's showing. So when we did the percolation test, we were looking at how quickly the water was infiltrating and at what rate. And what we found is that both. So we had a hole here and a hole here, and we tracked those. And once we did, we saw that it was that everything worked fine. We were seeing that the soil. We did a soil test. There was no indication of groundwater in the area at any time that would disrupt that infiltration. So that is like, I know that's a lot of information, but I think it's really important to know, because percolation tests have to be done by PE. Typically, it's a PE only. I haven't seen anything where you can have like an architect or a landscape architect sign off on this, it's typically a PE. Even your soil test has to be signed off by a PE. Even if you have like a soil expert who is PhD'd in soil, groundwater, it still has to be signed off by engineers. So that's really important to know. And because this is changing so often, sometimes you might not be aware of it, and you'll be almost ready to start a project, and you kind of find out about this at the last minute. Often it doesn't take a huge amount of time, but it does take a lot of coordination because you have so many different professionals that have to get scheduled to come on site, and so much prep has to be done because the holes need to be dug. There's some stuff that has to be done before the percolation test actually happens. You have to basically saturate the area and fill the hole up within 24 hours before the test, to show that the percolation will happen during even heavy rains, which is important. So all that takes time and effort, and there's people digging and stuff going on. And so, it doesn't necessarily take a huge amount of time, individual time, for one part of it, but for all the pieces, it can take a lot of time. And so at the same time, it does encourage people to use rain gardens, which I think is a great option because you can get the stormwater. The thing about a rain garden is that most of the time it's empty. So it can be just a part of your yard. It can be a really beautiful planted space that has native and native-ish plants, and it can really enhance your experience for your yard in a lot of different ways. But to do this, it does get pretty technical. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I'm going to try and do some more about this because it's kind of a hot topic in my world, and it's really interesting to me. So hope you like this, and reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.